In this lesson, we're going to be talking about privilege escalation. So what do I mean by privilege escalation? Well, when you log into a system, you are given a certain number of privileges. And in the case of normal users, that's some small subset of the total number of permissions or abilities that users may have on a system. So when we're talking about privilege escalation, we're talking about getting more privileges than you would normally have. And there are several ways to do this. For example, in Linux, I could do something like sudo, and we've done this before. So this is a privilege escalation. I don't have the privileges with my normal user to be able to do the kinds of things that Nmap needs to do to send out those sorts of packets. Those require administrative privileges. So sudo is a way to get a privilege escalation from my normal user. As a matter of fact, it's the preferred way of doing privilege escalation on Unix-like and certainly Linux systems. So you could use sudo. If you want to jump straight to root, for example, I could use the command su, which is actually switch user, and I could switch to any other user that I want. But if I don't give a user, it's going to switch me to root. It wants me to give a password, and in this case, there's actually no password for the root user, so I wouldn't be able to switch directly to root. However, what I could do is this. And this is going to authenticate me as the root user because I have root privileges using sudo. And you can see here that I am now logged in as root. The big key is the hash sign or the pound sign at the end of the line. That indicates that you are a root user, and I'm going to log out from there. So that's a couple of ways of getting legitimate privilege escalation using Linux. In Windows, starting with Windows Vista, Microsoft started to lock down the abilities. You'll see where you'll get a message from time to time popped up saying, hey, this is going to require some administrative privileges. Do you want to continue doing this or not? So that's actually a privilege escalation. Microsoft has given Windows the ability to automatically grant those privileges, but it requires that you log in and authenticate as a user that has that higher level of privileges. Same thing on Apple in Mac OS. When something requires administrative privileges, you'll get a dialog box saying, hey, this action requires administrative privileges, so log in as an administrative user or a user with administrative privileges, and we'll be happy to continue. So I've got this services application open, and you can see that most of these services here log on as local system. Local system has just about the highest level of privileges that you can get. So if you were able to compromise one of these programs or services, then you would automatically have about the highest level of privileges that you can have. In that case, you wouldn't need a privilege escalation. Or if you were a normal user and you were able to compromise one of these from a normal user context, you would automatically get your privilege escalation because you would then become local system. Sometimes programs need administrative privileges, and the way that Unix has typically handled this is there is a bit that gets set. So you can see here with all of these files and programs, there's a number of settings. You'll see read, write, execute, and we've got the user group world sort of concept when it comes to permissions. There are a couple of additional permissions that you will sometimes see, and one of those is the setuid bit. So if the setuid bit is on one of these files, then executing it causes the context of the program to get switched to a different user ID. And in that case, it would be the user ID of the program's owner or the owner of the file. We can take a look at programs that have the setuid bit. I'm going to look for files of type F with permissions. that have the set UID bit, and then I'm going to list those out. And of course, I need administrative privileges for that. We're going to try that again with administrative privileges. And you can see here right off, there's a couple. There's the mount CIFS program and the Unix check password. So that's a couple of programs that require that they be run under a particular user context, and in this case, the user context would be root. But privilege escalation, as just a general concept, as I mentioned earlier, is the idea of getting a higher level of privileges than you would normally have in the way that you would normally log in or get access to the system. When we're talking about breaking into systems or penetrating systems, sometimes you'll get in as a regular user, and what you will want to do is a privilege escalation to get to an administrative user or a super user in order to do more interesting and important things. But that's privilege escalation.